Hello everyone, Andrew Martin here, and welcome to this Game of the Day presentation for round 2 of the 2015 British Chess Championships, where we are going to focus on the board 1 game, and what an excellent game it was too, between FIDE Master C Storey playing white and Super Grandmaster David Howell playing with the black pieces. Well, Charlie kicked off with e4, and Howell responded with the solid Caro-Can defence. And perhaps slightly surprisingly, white played the two knights variation. Not thought to give white very much, but there's a certain attraction when you employ this variation in that a lot of lines you get the bishop pair. The main line is thought to be bishop g4, white goes h3, and now black most commonly takes on f3. Perhaps the most famous example of a player who liked the bishop pair going into this variation was Bobby Fischer back in the 1950s. But he never really achieved great results with it, as black can get a pretty solid position in virtually all the lines, produce the kind of pawn structure which is inimical to the two bishops. You're going to see exactly what I mean in this coming game. But Howell doesn't take on f3 straight away, instead he prefers bishop h5. This is a sharp line, keeping the tension, but when you play this with black, you've got to be careful that you don't get tricked on the white squares as I've marked, b5, c6 and d7. White plays g4, the bishop goes back, and now the knight comes in. As you can see, setting up ideas like bishop to b5 check. Well, Howell played knight c6, that's absolutely the correct move. And now white has a choice to make. Well, in the game, Charlie chooses a rather quiet line, knight takes g6, which, as I say, where he eventually hopes to make use of the bishop pair. In order to do this, he's got to create a pawn lever to activate the bishops. And that's something Charlie doesn't manage to achieve in the subsequent course of the game, as you'll see. It's all right to have the bishop pair, but you've got to make them work. Black hopes to create a blocked central pawn structure, which is difficult to break down. Instead of knight takes g6, obviously white can consider bishop b5 here, or d4, with e6 h4 as the critical line. This hopes to make the bishop on g6 a rather awkward piece for black to deal with. But then I think f6, knight takes g6, h takes g6, and if queen d3 here, we can defend economically with king f7. It's not so easy for white to attack the black king. The black king is in fact quite safe. And now you can see what I mean about a pawn lever. How is white going to get the bishops working in this position? The black king, I can assure you, is very safe, and black's development's fairly easy. The bishop can come to d6 or b4, knight can come to e7, rook can come to c8. Moreover, the white pawns can end up rather exposed in this line. So Charlie prefers knight takes g6, Howell recaptures with the h-pawn, bishop g2, e6, d4, bishop d6, and now white's got to find a way of opening up the position to use his bishops. How can he do this? Well, he's got to use a pawn lever, somehow, somewhere. Perhaps the most obvious pawn lever is c4, but as you can see it's a long way off. White's knight on c3 is not ideal here. So he's probably going to have to move that knight and then aim to play c4. This is not going to be easy to achieve. What are the other pawn levers? Well, there's of course f4, f5. This to me seems even less easy to achieve. And of course when white's pushing his f-pawn forward in any position here, he's going to be weakening his king side. So that's a rather ambitious attempt, which actually I don't see white being able to achieve. And the final one, of course, is h4, h5. This seems much more achievable in the given position. But, as you can see, h4 is covered very nicely with the queen and the rook. So with white unable to see a way to get his pawns rolling to open up the position for the bishops, Charlie just chooses a natural move here, bishop e3, but it's a move really that leads to nothing. I mean, maybe it was time just for the modest move knight e2, just recognising the knight on c3 as a problem piece and looking forward towards c4 sometime in the future. I mean, even here, black is very comfortable. He plays queen c7, stopping bishop f4, and then just brings his knight out. White can play c3, but this is not a great position for white. He can't do very much with it. Black is absolutely fine, but maybe that was white's best. Well, Charlie went bishop e3, black went rook c8, very natural, queen to d3, and now that the g-pawn is unprotected, black can play knight f6. Very good timing by David Howell. The reason white needs to protect his g-pawn is that he can try for h4, h5, but, well, as you can see with the knight back on g8 and the queen back on d1, he couldn't do this. So queen d3, knight f6 makes perfect sense. Around here, white starts to lose the thread of the game. I mean, I'm not actually sure what white should play. It's not that easy. He plays queen b5, a move which is not very good. Black calls his bluff with a6, and now Charlie beats the retreat with queen to e2. Problem for white is he can't take that b-pawn, as knight b4 causes an immediate accident. However, white protects that pawn. Black then goes knight d7, and the white queen is in trouble. Rook c7 is the threat, just mopping up the queen. Can you see a way out for the queen? So queen e2, around here, black really starts to take over the initiative, and now another very good move, queen to b6, putting the question to the queen side. Now, I was speaking to Charlie over breakfast this morning, and he mentioned to me that his original intention was actually to castle long, but the more he looked at the position, the more he disliked that move. And it's actually easy to see why. In fact, it's a very good job for him that he didn't castle long, because now knight b4 opens up immediate fire. And if a3, the cruncher, rook takes c3. This is a very strong move. And however white plays, he's in serious trouble. The obvious move is to take the rook. Then we go knight a2 check, king d2, and now the simple queen c7. It's really difficult to defend that pawn on c3. If white tries queen d3, then knight e4 check. White's probably got to take that twice, and then knight takes c3, immediately regaining the initiative and regaining material. Going back to rook takes c3, well, he could take the knight. Then I think rook c4 is simple enough, and if c3, queen takes b4. This way round, black has an attack and he's not even material down. In fact, he's a pawn up. So I think we can safely say that what black is winning this position. So white decides in the game, going back to the game itself now, to castle on the king side, but this allows queen takes b2. And after this, events take a forcing course. There are a number of forced exchanges here, as white seeks to open up the diagonal for his bishop, regain his pawn, but black can chop on d4. Bishop takes, queen takes, and now what is white to play? Problem for white, quite simply, is the exposed position of his king, with queen f4 the main culprit as far as white's concerned. Charlie in the game played bishop takes e6. Perhaps he couldn't resist it. It looks okay, but black has a really fabulous move as a response. Maybe the best move here was just to settle for rook fd1, and if queen f4, bishop takes b7. After white vacates the f1 square for the king, he's probably not getting mated here, but the best he can do after rook takes h3 is to limp into some bad endgame. For instance, queen e4, rook c4, very good, takes, bishop takes a6, and now rook takes c2. Okay, this should be a win for black, but it might not be that easy. For instance, white gets his pawn rolling here. Is it that easy to win this? At any rate, that was white's best chance. Because as you'll see in the game, bishop takes e6 fails to the great move queen f4. And of course, Howell was onto this tactical opportunity in a flash. Problem for white is that he can't take the rook. If he takes the rook, discover check, just king f8. And the white king is defenceless, unfortunately. If he goes f3 to protect against the mate, we go rook takes h3. Best then is probably queen g2, and now rook h2 is the move that mops up. The only move is rook f2, and then I think we just keep it simple. We take the queen. Neither capture on g2 is at all satisfactory. If he takes with the rook, then queen d4 check is a winning fork. If he takes with the king, then queen g3 check, king f1, bishop c5. And this is a graphic reminder about positions with opposite colour bishops. You need the initiative. Here, white has nothing to set against black's threats against his king. So that also wins. So going back to the game, queen f4, very strong. Bishop d5 discovered, check, king f8. And now rook fd1. All the way through, white has had problems with the king's rook. Well, again, given that this move is losing, perhaps rook fe1 was the best. Although, again, black gets to a much better ending after the simple rook takes h3. Queen e4 is best. And now I think rook h4. Very good. Queen takes f4, bishop takes f4. Unfortunately for white, his position's falling apart here. Bishop takes b7, rook takes g4 check and takes on c2. I think this is slightly better than the last endgame for black, as white doesn't have a passed pawn. En passant, we note that bishop takes a6 now, fails to bishop h2, winning immediately. So white's got problems whichever way you want to look at it. He tried rook fd1, rook takes h3, queen e4. And Howell played the calm move queen f6, eyeing up both the white king and the rook on a1. Incidentally, black can also play queen h2 check here. And if king f1, the brilliant move rook g3. I'm sure that David Howell didn't miss that opportunity, but he probably just thought that queen f6 won without any risk at all. But rook g3 is pretty strong. If white takes the rook, we go rook takes c2. And there, white has to surrender his queen. Rook ac1, queen h2. Once again, we've got a position where opposite colour bishops are the key. And if bishop takes b7, here we've got bishop takes g3. It's curious that the white rooks are kind of powerless in this position to prevent black's attack. Maybe Howell was looking at this variation and he thought, okay, I don't want to go for this. There might be something I've missed. You know, the two rooks could create some sort of trouble. So he decides to play safely, queen f6. And after rook e1, bishop c5 justifies his choice. As the threat to f2, well, it's actually pretty terminal. White can't see a satisfactory way to defend himself. So he tries king g2. This allows a nice finish. Queen takes f2 check, king takes h3, bishop d6. And the opposite colour bishops, of course, facilitate this nice finish. There are numerous threats, and white can't defend against all of them. So, a very good game by David Howell, and a very nicely played initiative from black. Charlie's problem, he got the bishop pair, he couldn't do anything with the bishop pair. And perhaps that's the story of this variation.